Hey everyone, welcome to Software is a Team Sport, and I am Chris Griffing, and I'm here with Robin Heinze, and we're going to be talking about software and teamwork and all sorts of stuff. So, Robin, tell the audience what what your story is.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm a software engineer turned director of engineering at the moment, but I've been doing programming for 11 years now. Um, I started out as a spreadsheet, uh, spreadsheet monkey at it was a paper company, but I was in the office.
I mean,
Um,
Excel is Turing complete, so that's programming to me.
Yes, a lot of spreadsheets, which turned into macros, which turned into basically applications that they didn't want to pay uh a real service for, so they just had people build them in Excel. So I learned a lot about databases and VBA and all that stuff, but I didn't really have anybody helping me or mentoring me, and I was like, I don't feel like I'm doing this very well. I feel like I'm kind of playing in a sandbox and I have no idea what I'm doing. So, I quit that job and went to a 4-month code boot camp, which they were everywhere at that point. This was 2014. And I learned Rails, web apps. So that was full time, 40 hours a week for 4 months, and then they placed me in an internship.
Awesome. Oh, they
Um,
did placement? That was a
Yeah,
good one
they
then.
did placement,
Nice.
which was critical. That was the only reason it was successful for me is because they placed us with a company for a month of unpaid internship. And so you got to actually work with people and show that you were somewhat capable before they committed to actually hiring you. And they liked me well enough to give me a job. And
Awesome.
yeah, so I did Rails for 3 years. And then moved to my current company, which is Infinite Red. It's a expert consultancy doing React Native mobile apps,
hmm
and that's where I've been for the last, oh my gosh, 7 years.
Awesome. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. It's nice to find a company that you can really stick with. That's cool.
Yes, this is it's a really small company. There's only oh gosh, how many are there now? 25, 26 of us now. Um, so it's a small team, and the founders created the company with the intention of it being a forever company. They wanted to build a company that was somewhere that they wanted to work forever.
hmm
After working at a lot of maybe not so great places, they knew what they didn't want.
Yeah.
And built a company that they did want. So I'm happy to be in a place where I don't feel like I ever really have to look for a job if I don't want to.
Yeah, that's great.
Um,
Yeah, Jamin and Gant are just great.
they are
Super
so
cool people.
great. Yeah. Todd too, although he's not as
Oh,
public, but he's
okay.
he's the third of the trio
See, I don't
of
know if I've
owners.
met Todd. Okay.
Yeah, he's more behind the scenes. But the three of them really are just the foundation of this company, and they work really well together.
Awesome. And you're also a host of a podcast, right? React
That's
Native Radio?
right. That's right. We actually took over a podcast called React Native Radio.
Okay.
We bought it and then started doing it ourselves about 4 years ago or something. And Jamin was like, "Hey, would you want to do a podcast?" And I was like, Maybe."
Right.
And then next thing I know, he's like, "Okay, our hosts are gonna be me and Robin," and I'm like, "Okay, I guess I'm doing a podcast." Uh, but I was nervous at first, and then really fell into it, and I love it. And we have a lot of fun. It's a weekly show, and we just talk about React Native. And
Awesome.
yeah.
What's one of the coolest episodes you feel like you've done lately?
So we've done a lot of cool ones lately. I think my favorite was we sat down with um uh Taylor Desson, who is a a tech recruiter. Yeah,
He's
he
fairly
knows.
well known.
I swear he knows everybody. That guy has a network just miles wide.
I mean, recruiters kind of need that.
It's true. It's part of the job. But he's so easy and fun to talk to. So yeah, he came on our show and talked about just like React Native hiring, that whole scene and like what it's like getting a job in tech right now and what it's like hiring in tech right now and just life in general. It was really, really, really good episode. Um, yeah, so that was a fun one. Like we've done so many. Like we did a great one about code review, just like in general, like our like feelings about what makes a good code review and like how to be empathetic while you're reviewing code and like what makes it most effective and like um that kind of thing. It was actually a really like long conversation. And it's one of our evergreen ones that you can kind of listen to whether you're into React Native or not.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, it's very tech agnostic. So
So, like, what are some of the takeaways? Like, how do you feel about code review? What do you do to make it better?
so like my general approach to code review is like it can be a vulnerable position. Like as the person authoring the pull request, like this is your code that you've been working on maybe for several days or several weeks even. It's really personal. It's a really vulnerable thing to put that out to people who are going to critique it.
Mhm.
And so I really try to keep that in mind, like put myself in their position while I'm reviewing. So like everything, like don't nitpick things that don't matter. Like don't be like accusatory in your questions like why did you leave this out? More like
Could
just
we
open a
remove this?
dialogue like what was your reasoning or like walk me through like this like approaching it with this like benefit of the doubt, like assuming positive intent can go a long way in getting them to not just like immediately be on the defensive.
Mhm.
Um and then things like increasing the bandwidth of your code review, like if it's a lot of stuff, it's a lot of new logic added, it can really help to just like, hey, can we like hop in Zoom and just like walk me through your changes because it can help create the right mental model because like reading the files they're in a like alphabetical order
Right, and
and
it
they're
may
like
not be, like, the order
yeah
in which they mattered.
right exactly it's not conceptual order like but just like have them like walk you through their changes can help a lot and you having enough of a mental model to review well and like
Mhm.
actually give like good feedback
Nice.
but yeah.
Yeah, at a previous company I worked at, Fairwinds, they used a thing called conventional comments. So I don't know if you've heard of
I
conventional
haven't.
commits. That's where like your commit messages has like fix colon
Okay. Oh, yeah,
something,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
then like feet colon whatever, and it describes what the commit does. But conventional comments take that to the code review process, where you might prefix it with knit colon
I
and
have seen
something.
knit is the one that I think, like, people use even without knowing what that is. Because like, I definitely use knit all the time, and so do my coworkers, but I've never heard of this, like, official system,
Yeah, it's
but,
great.
like, that one has escaped.
Okay,
But it makes
interesting.
sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, because it just gives someone a little bit of context before they're
Yeah.
gonna read the message. So, like, hey, it's a knit. Like, you don't have to fix it, but
Right.
could you? Maybe.
Yeah.
Like, could we do something different?
Yeah. Yeah. It prefaces it, like, "Don't feel like I'm, like, just being overly critical, like, this is a knit, take it or leave it, but it's something I noticed."
Yep.
Yeah, that's really true. We definitely use that.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. Um. So yeah, I guess more team stuff. Like, how has been like managing teams? You mentioned that you like transitioned into that recently,
Yeah.
ish.
So it's been like almost 2 years since I moved into more of a leadership role, and it's been kind of a slow transition on purpose. Like I've um the first year I was part of the leadership team, I was still full time on projects,
Uh-huh.
like doing work with clients as well. And then the second year I've moved to halftime. So we're kind of like slowly making the transition, but
Okay.
it's definitely been a completely different perspective, like being at the table for all of the decisions and these conversations that I never would have even known about, and having to sort of know how to frame them for the team in a way that's helpful, and also like getting to know everyone and their strengths in a way that I didn't before. I've really learned how critical it is to know everyone on your team extremely well.
Uh-huh.
Know where they're strong, know where they're improving, like know what frustrates them, like what excites them. it is really important, and it takes a lot of time as a leader to do that well. And so I'm looking forward to being fully focused on leadership and being able to devote a lot more time to that.
Awesome. Okay. Because yeah, as like an independent contributor, like you just want to get your own work done and maybe
Hmm.
pair program from time to
Right.
time. Right.
Right. Yeah. Like most of your team interactions are like they're short or like for the purpose of like furthering your work. But it's not necessarily the focus of your job. It's sort of like adjacent to your job.
Right. Moving into like leadership, would you say that you spend a lot more time in Jira now, or wherever you test track?
Luckily, so because of the way our business is set up, we're a consultancy, and so mostly our clients are the ones that have to spend time in Jira, which is great.
That's amazing. Nice.
Um, I do spend a lot of time in Slack.
Sure.
And these days more and more time in email doing like sales related things and like
Okay.
which is
Like
uh
sales, like assistant. Like you guys have a sales
y-
team, I assume, and then
yes,
like
we have
you.
a sales
Yeah.
team, but one of my sort of roles that I'm taking on more recently is like being the sort of technical perspective to the sales process. So when the client has like technical questions or like feasibility questions, a lot of times the sales team will bring me in just to
Or estimates or things like that,
exactly,
right? Yep.
exactly.
Yeah, like how big should the team be to accomplish this
Right,
goal?
like how
Yeah.
many devs we're gonna need if they want this done in 6 months, or
Mhm.
like, is this even possible? Or like, yeah, basically that kind of question.
Gotcha. Yeah, I worked at an agency and I wasn't in leadership at the agency, but I still got asked by sales to do some of that stuff, which was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard because sales and coding are two incredibly different skills. And so in order to like you have a sales team, they have to be good at sales. And it's really, really hard to find people who are good at sales, but also have a technical background. So a lot of times you need the teamwork.
Mhm.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how about this? Like what's like your process for starting a new project, like onboarding the team, like, getting them the documentation they need to like get up and running?
Yeah. So usually like the sales process will have gone on for several months. Like it goes through sales, it goes through legal. And then when we finally have things signed and we know we're gonna start, we will have what we call a sales handoff. So we get everyone in a room, the whole sales team, the dev team that's going to be assigned to the project, all in a meeting. And sales basically gives them everything they know about a project, which sometimes is not everything there is to know, but it's everything that they do know.
Great.
Uh, and says, okay, this project is now yours. And it's handed off to the team. The team usually is comprised of two, maybe three devs, but
Mhm.
there's always one, what we call a primary dev, which is uh, not not the same thing as like a senior junior thing. It's a primary secondary thing, and it's not related to level. It's just the owner essentially, like of the project. So a person who's a primary on a project one like time may not be the primary the next time. Like almost all of our devs have been primaries in the past. It's
And
just
that's nice because it levels up everybody to
yeah,
be able to fill that role, right? If you
right.
just have
And
the same people doing it, then you're really siloed.
exactly, exactly. And that's really how we level people up is like if we have someone who is a newer primary or is less experienced, we'll put them on a team with a really experienced primary as one of their secondaries to kind of balance it out and to help them level up.
Okay,
Um,
cool. Now, in this like kickoff meeting, is that with the client too, or is that just internal?
no, so the sales handoff is just internal, so we can
Ah,
like
okay.
kind of dish all of the
The quirks of
the
the client,
tea
maybe.
as you will, yeah. Um, all the info that maybe we wouldn't say in front of the client. And then usually a few days later or the following week, we do what we call the kickoff. And that's with the client. That's like the official start of the project. It's when we start billing them. Um, we meet them. They start giving us all like this like fire hose of information. That's when we ask for all the things, the docs, the designs, like we establish the process, like are we using Jira? Are we using GitHub? Like what are we using? Maybe like get the project architecture decisions made, like what services are we using, what stack. That's kind of when everything is like off to the races.
Okay. So, like, would you say the majority of the projects you do are greenfield, or are you like also taking over existing projects from clients?
Um, I would say the majority are greenfield.
Okay.
We've been getting some requests for brownfield more
Hmm.
recently, but the majority are greenfield or sort of taking over a greenfield. Like it's a greenfield app, but we're taking it over and like
Sure.
helping make it better.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I've done that a bunch where, some one person inside a company built something and someone else is like, "Oh, this is amazing. Like, what's it going to take to make it like, fully releasable?" And that one person is like, "I don't know." Like, right? So then they need an expert.
yeah, exactly. We kind of come in as the team that knows React Native really well and can help you do pretty much anything that you need.
Awesome. Okay. Um so like have you ever like had to deal with like adding a new dev to the team, or is it pretty much just like solid from the start?
So yeah, team size changes because sometimes they'll maybe need to go faster than we're currently going. Like they've got a deadline and they don't want to decrease scope. So they are willing to add a dev. So yeah, we do kind of fluctuate the team size sometimes. Usually going from like maybe 2 to 3.
Sure. What is that process like? How have you like found things you could do to make that easier?
So usually it's a lot of pairing.
Sure. Okay.
Like the primary will pair with the new dev to like walk them through the code base and um maybe get them up to speed on the context of like what projects they're working on and like what features they've been doing.
Hmm.
Maybe start them off with like some bug fixes just to like because bug fixes I find are the easiest way to sort of get your bearings in a code base
Right.
because
There's like tracing and
right,
yeah.
you're not adding anything new. You're like just it's a puzzle. You're sort of like finding your way around the code base in order to figure out what's wrong.
Yeah, because there's a lot of exploration, so it creates that like mental map. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to like go to a lot of places to be like, oh, is it over here? Is it over here? Like, and you kind of like do the thing where you start pulling at a thread. You're like, okay, this is called by this, which is called by this over here, and you're like, all of a sudden you've like kind of like seen a bunch of spots of the code. So yeah,
Yeah. In VS Code for me, like when I'm getting into a new code base or I'm reading some open source package because I got to figure out why something's happening that way, I will often like maybe pull it down and just like Apple click through like all the things like, oh, what is this thing? Where's that defined? And then I've got 20 tabs open in VS Code. Like
right.
yeah,
Exactly. You're like VS Code makes it very easy to just like, oh, where does this go? Where does this go?
yeah,
It's like the Wikipedia game. What's that?
yes.
Like, yeah.
We're like clicking the first link. How many like clicks
How
does
many
it take to
steps
get to
to,
philosophy?
yeah, something like that.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay. Um, what would you say you could do like documentation wise, or like how often are you dealing with more than one repo on a project? I guess.
So more than one repo is more rare. But it does happen. Sometimes there's like a web repo and a mobile repo and um documentation is definitely important. We always like to have not only readmes but like setup scripts.
Hmm.
So you can run a command and get set up for the project
Yep.
with one command basically.
Like a dev container or something
Hmm.
as well. Like okay. Yep.
Yeah. And then like all we always have in the README like everything from like what services are you going to need to have accounts with and like what env files are you going to need and all these things are really important to have in the README for new devs.
Yep.
I like success criteria would be you can just get like tell them where the repo is and they can clone it and get it set up without having to ask you anything.
That's my favorite thing to do for like a new dev to the team. Like
Yeah.
have them go through what the README says, and if they run into any hiccups, they're the perfect person. Like
Oh
that's
yeah,
their best like first
right.
commit.
That's your
They can
job
just
now
update it.
is
Yeah,
like go through this and anytime you have to ask a question, put that in the README so the next person doesn't have to ask it. Yeah.
exactly, 100%. Yep. Okay. Uh, do you guys do back end as well?
We used to, but we don't anymore. We used to do Rails backends. We also used to do Elixir
Oh,
backends.
I love Elixir.
Yeah. I actually got hired. Like when I was hired, it was with the promise that I'd get to do Elixir, and then they brought me into React Native like 2 months later, which is fine. I love it, but that was what I was like. Ooh, I get to do Elixir,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden I'm building mobile apps. But
Sure.
yeah, we used to do backend, but we've basically um decided to like specialize in React Native and really like lean into being experts in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've pretty much got everyone on our team, even the people who used to do web and backend are now doing React Native.
So is there maybe like a case where a company needs something made, they don't have the back end devs, so you end up like partnering with some other agency that's doing the back end while you're doing the front end stuff?
Um, we haven't done that in recent memory. Usually
Sure.
clients come to us with either a backend already built
Okay.
or a like a team that's building it.
Okay.
But we have been known to have clients that have a different contractor doing the back end and then
Mm-hmm.
us doing the front end.
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess we do have some partners that if they asked us, we would have like recommendations for people that can build their back end. And we would also do like if it made sense for the product, we would also do things like serverless or like like Firebase or
Yep.
yeah.
Lambda or
Yeah.
any of that, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that like cross team collaboration process like? I guess.
With clients, so it can be really different for each client, but really it's always really interesting because we obviously can't control who is on their team and who they're working with. Like we can control who's on our team. Obviously, we hire to fit our culture, but we can't control what who's on a client team. So we have to be prepared to kind of work with anybody.
Okay.
Um, and we've had some really, really great clients and some more interesting, frustrating clients. But for the most part, it's always pretty easy. Because at the end of the day, we're all devs, and like once you get like kind of all the devs in a room together and you just like start talking technical stuff, like it's all good. You just like leave the project managers out, leave the stakeholders. You're just like, can we just like come in, like talk about the code? It's all
Sure.
good.
There you go. Yeah, that makes sense. How about this? Like, do you ever work kind of side by side with their internal devs, like building something out?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Quite a lot. As we've sort of moved to bigger clients, we used to do more like startups. Like here, get our MVP like off the ground so we can like show it to investors kind of startups. But we've over time evolved to bigger, more enterprise kind of clients. And they a lot of times will have a team that we are working with, advising, like
Training even?
yeah, training. And it's definitely a balance between maintaining our team's kind of autonomy and boundaries and like our process. Because we don't consider ourselves a placement agency. There are agencies that do that where it's like, here you can have 3 devs for your team for a year, and they kind of like assimilate into that team.
Right, like embedded. Like, yeah.
Right. Like, so it's like basically like you're working for that company for a year. And that's not what we do. We like what we're offering clients is here's our team. They are going to like provide you a service, but we're not placement. Like they shouldn't feel like they're working for your company. So whenever we're in with a client where we're working alongside their team, it's really important for us to maintain boundaries about like things like we don't take meetings on Fridays. We have what we call no meeting Fridays.
Oh, that's nice.
So like it is nice. So when the client comes, they're like, okay, we do a daily stand up. We're like we won't be able to do that on Fridays. Like we can have it in Slack. We're happy to do async. Things like that, which maintain our autonomy and our boundaries. While also making sure like they get what they need. But like we're like, okay, but this is what we do and this is how we do it. Um, that's always important when working alongside client
Yeah.
devs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've definitely worked at some places where the daily stand-up was done in Slack, and then we would do the daily stand-up as well, and it was just repeating what we said in
Also,
Slack.
you're like, both?
Yeah, that was not fun.
I am such a fan of async stand-ups. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a relic from like the in-office days, like where you had your desk clump, and stand-up was literally everybody stopping what they were doing and like standing up, not even like going anywhere, just standing up, giving their update, and then continuing working. But it's like it's become this thing where it's just another meeting. And so whenever we can, we really advocate for Slack only stand-ups, because not only is there then like everyone's like time is saved because your update becomes 2 minutes of writing your update in Slack and then moving on.
Mhm.
But there's a record of it. You can tag people, like bring other people in. You can like post like links to pull requests, and like it's so much more valuable in my opinion than like everyone standing around and saying an update that everyone's gonna forget in 2 seconds. So yeah, we're huge fans of async stand-ups, and we really push for it whenever we can.
Yeah, that paper trail is
Yeah.
awesome because then you can always just use that in like, documentation to people
Yeah.
above you, like for the clients, people
Right.
above them at the organization, right?
Right. Exactly.
Cool.
Always in Slack.
Yeah. Um, what would you say, like maybe back to code review? What is like one of the worst things that you think someone could do in code review?
One of the worst things. I think, well, so one thing that is could be really harmful is honestly not reviewing. So like the person that's the rubber stamper, the looks good to me, like
Yep.
everything, it's not actually looking at anything. Obviously, that's harmful to the code, like to the code itself, to the product, like, and to the dev who's not getting any feedback and not getting better.
Yeah.
So that's one end of the spectrum, and the other end would just be like being like really unnecessarily aggressive and like uh blaming blaming them, shaming them, like um just telling them that they did it wrong for no other reason than like personal preference.
Right.
Like I think anytime that you start making a developer feel like shame, then it's not going to help anybody.
Exactly. Right. It makes them defensive, makes them
Mhm.
less wanting to speak up. Right.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I totally agree. The looks good to me thing is kind of fun. So we're doing a thing called GitCon here in like a couple months, and it's like going to be, pre-recorded. So we're trying to think of like some good infotainment kind of like
Huh.
sections or whatever.
Yeah.
And I started like brainstorming scripts, and one of them was like code review high noon. So it's like, the old cowboy movies
Yeah.
where there's like the author and the reviewer are like they're gonna duel at noon and whatever, right? But instead, it's the author shows up at the right time and is just waiting for like an hour for the code reviewer to show up. And then, he's like sweating. They finally get there. They do the eye thing and, like diddle-doo-doo-doo, like that song and all that. And then finally, boom, clock strikes and the reviewer just goes, looks good to me.
that's that's awesome. It's
Yeah, I'd
so
love to
like
make that, but it's going to be like high production value. So I don't know.
I love it. I think it's great. And I think everyone knows like a looks good to me, or especially when like it's one thing if it's been a couple hours and you get that and you know they've actually looked at it. And it's another if you open it and then 2 minutes later you get the
Right.
looks good to
Yeah.
me.
Especially if it's like 5 or 6 files. It's like, there's no
Right?
way
Like
you
you
read that
didn't
fast.
look at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you rein that in as like a team lead when you recognize it looks good to me? Like I assume you guys have a great culture in which that's probably rare, but a new person on the team may need some coaching.
Yeah, I would. So if I were the author and I was getting looks good to me, um, I'm making it a verb now.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome.
If I were the author, I would just like invite them like into Zoom, be like, "Hey, can I go over my changes with you?" And basically like force them to review, like invite them to review.
Okay.
That's what I would do as an author. As a leader, I would just bring it up with them as empathetically as I can. Like, be like, hey, I've noticed like a lot of the PRs you reviewed, like, just like looks good to me. Like, let's talk, like, figure out what's behind it. Like talk to them like, hey, do you not have enough time? Like, are you feeling like you don't have enough time? Is their code actually really that good? Those kinds of things. And like, if the case is that they don't have enough time, we would just have a talk about like why that is. Like, what are you feeling like is more important than this? And maybe kind of adjust their mindset or their priorities. And also, if the code they're reviewing really is that good, what I a lot of times will tell people to do is say that, like, find things in the code that you think are good and comment on those.
That is like a huge team building thing. That's amazing.
Right. Yeah. Because like everyone loves to get compliments on their PR and not just like criticism. So like if it really is that good, tell them why it was good. Like, oh, I loved what you named this, or like, I love how you wrote this function. Like, this was really elegant, or whatever. Because then they know that you're actually looking at their code, and then they feel good about themselves.
Yeah. That's great. That's amazing. Do you use any tools to identify, like, if someone might be, like, reviewing too quickly? You know, like, is there any, like, measurement stuff for that?
I don't know if those exist, then I don't know about them.
Okay.
But I don't know how I would feel if I would, like, as a person reviewing code reviews, I don't know how I'd feel if someone was like, it's like the click watcher, like the software that like measures like where your eyes are or like how often you're clicking. I'd be like, I don't need the big brother. I need like, I don't know. I would hope that there was more trust on my team than that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's about like trust. It's just more like it would go the other way too. Like, are people spending a lot of time in code review?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, just identifying patterns. So yeah, I don't know if any software exists either, but I do work for GitKraken, so I don't know. Maybe
I don't know.
Maybe
I don't
something
know.
we think about.
GitKraken does their
No, so we don't do that yet, but it's something that we could consider.
Yeah. Sometimes it would be interesting if like you know how in GitHub they have each file has like a check mark and you can say like viewed. It would be interesting if that was public to the author.
Oh,
I would be like what that would look like, or whether that would cause chaos. Who knows? But like I use that a lot when I'm going through PRs, like making sure I've at least acknowledged everything.
Yeah, I don't even know if they have an API to fetch some of that. So yeah, I don't know.
Who knows?
Something to think about. But I don't want to
an
take
idea
up
for somebody out there. Free idea.
For sure. I want to make sure I don't take up too much more of your time. Is there anything you want to plug kind of here towards the end?
I will just plug our podcast, React Native Radio. You can find it at reactnativeradio.com. We've got some really, really fun announcement style episodes coming up, which I think people will be very interested in. And then my company is Infinite.red.
I go to Chain React like for the past couple of years, and it's just so fun.
Yeah. We also put on Chain React, but that's already happened, and we don't have dates for next year, so I couldn't plug that if I wanted to.
Yep, that's fine, but we can still at least say it's just such a fun event.
Yes.
You guys really knock it out of the
that
park.
means a lot. Yeah. We put on the React Native conference every summer here in Portland.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm just up in Seattle, so I just drive down.
You just pop on down. Easy.
Well, cool. Thank you so much for joining. I hope the viewers enjoyed this, and yeah, we will see you on the next episode.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thank you for having me.
Yep.